Hey everybody, good weekend. Welcome to Watches with Dennis. Doing a live stream Saturday morning here, which starting to be, if there's anything I ever do consistently, I guess this is the closest I get when it comes to this channel at least. But welcome for those of you. I started a little bit early, just simply to let people join in. What few we'll usually get in the morning. If you're watching it in the recorded form, hopefully it's a good show. We don't know yet how it's going to turn out, but I do think it has some potential. So in terms of today's discussion, we're actually going to talk about a couple of companies based off of the Morgan Stanley report that's come out regarding the Swiss watch industry. And I do have a link in the description where you can go. It's to the professionalwatches.com website. They have the graph. This graph has been on a number of sites from the Morgan Stanley report, which actually shows a 6-year period of what's been happening with the top 20 watch brands in the industry. And hey, Kevin, good morning. Hope things are going well out in Florida for you. So before we go into the subject of today, though, I'll do my little, I guess, watch update stuff. So no callback from Rolex, which it's been a whole week. So I guess that's not surprising. I did follow up on my Longa that's being serviced. I did hear back that, yes, it's still with them. They have not gotten a time estimate back from the watchmaker in terms of when it will be complete. I said I would check in after about 2 months after turning it in. So I just emailed the warranty crew to find out, because they had contacted me a little over a month ago when they indicated it was back there. So I wasn't really expecting it to be ready yet, because I was told it'd be about 2 months once they, I guess, started the ticket on it or whatnot. And so basically it was like a 3-week period before that even happened. But anyway, just things are going along, but they didn't really have an update for me, and that they would reach out to me once they do. So I'm hoping sometime maybe before the official start of summer, I hear back, if not get it back. I don't know. I was told ahead of time Longa is very slow currently on their servicing, which I guess is true with a lot of other places. Every watch I've had serviced since the start of the pandemic, I think has been at least 2 months. So that doesn't seem inconsistent or anything to me, but I was warned ahead of time. So that's what's going on with that. I haven't bought anything new lately or anything. Today I'm wearing my Seiko Turtle. I guess it's a King Turtles that Save the Ocean Series 1 on the rubber strap, because I don't like the bracelet very much. And when it gets warmer, I usually switch to more non-metal sorts of things. So, I have NATOs for a lot of these watches, and I'm not the biggest fan about that, but about NATO, I'm not quite sure why. I think it looks a little, I don't know. I change my mind on them from time to time, but I have a number of NATO. Of course, I have more NATO straps probably than anything else, which is probably true for most people with strap collections, which are much more affordable than watch collections. Oh, hey, Koji, welcome to the live stream. What happened? Not much. I bought it used, bought it through Watchbox. And when I got it, I put it on the time grapher. And the time grapher indicated it was running about 90 seconds a day fast, which is unacceptably fast for such an expensive watch. It's out of spec. So, and then as I let it, like the amplitude was borderline on it. And I wouldn't have thought much of it, but as the watch wound down more, because it has like a 3-day power reserve, it started to drop unacceptably low, which low amplitude with high timekeeping, too fast of timekeeping, and beat error was fine. To me, would just suggest that the movement had never been serviced. And I knew it was from the photos. It was the older model. Well, from the reference number too, but Longa back in 2015 changed their movements that they use in the Longa 1. And so it was, I was a little surprised at that because of, I knew it was an older one, but yes. So Koji, when I asked them when I got it, and I almost always throw them on the time grapher pretty quickly when I get a watch. If for no other reason than, as a general rule, I review the watch for this channel after I wear it for a week. So sometimes, usually during the week, I will time graph it because I need to record those numbers ahead of time. So I have them in my script. So anyway, so I time graph everything is my point. And yeah, I was like, did you guys not check this? Because it seems really weird that, one of the advantages of buying through a purveyor, a secondhand dealer like that, one is the warranty. which is the big thing. But two is usually they service these things. And the salesperson had indicated, yes, that it had been checked. But my guess is it had been checked when they got it. This was one that was actually on their sales section at one point. So here's my theory. They got the watch in. It's probably an older model, like an early 2000s model, definitely pre 2015, but I don't know what year exactly. Not the first year, though, because it's display case back. And it would have been way more had it been the first year, because those are expensive. Expensive. So anyway, and I think it was probably still within spec, so they didn't do anything with it. And then either, I don't think something happened, like nothing behaved like it was broken. So I just think it's a sat. The oils have hardened over time or dried up if they used modern enough lubricants. And, long story short, no one ever checked it again after they got it in. And so maybe it was borderline when they got it in and they're like, okay, it's all right. And then, if they've been sitting on this thing for 8 years in inventory, I mean, who knows? How often do these trade hands? Probably not all that much, because I think it's been pretty transparent. My understanding is like, well, I really like that watch, and a lot of people do. Like, they trade for a lot less secondhand because Longa makes you buy their lower end stuff like this to get into like the Odysseus and stuff. So some people are kind of forced to go to the 80 and buy them, and then they sell them. So I don't know what the backstory on this was. It didn't include its watch and papers though. So I think it was just an original buyer who, traded it in, or, traded it for cash. So anyway, so then it goes, the other thing is, I don't know if they know how to service them. So, because I sent it back and I thought this probably just needs a service, right? Like, it winds fine. No beat error of note. Everything, you can see the movement. It looks good. Date function works fine, right? So their watchmaker's probably going to service it, right? They said no, they had to send it, or they I don't know if they had to. They sent it to Longa. So that's the other thing, is they checked it. I wonder if they checked it. It was within spec, and they're like, we don't have someone who will work on these movements. The movements are too expensive. So off to Germany it goes. But it is all covered under warranty. I'm just waiting. So anyway, but that's the story on that. It's just I've been out. It did suck to get a watch. By far the most. I did a number of trades to make that one happen, but nonetheless, the purchase price was way more than any watch I've ever bought, by like 10 grand. So yeah, I'm annoyed that I don't have it, but it's not the first time I've gotten a watch and right away had to go back in. I've had to do that twice before. So, on more affordable watches. So it's annoying, but it happens, but not to whine about it. But anyway, that's what's been going on. Hey, Neff, good morning. Yes, we are back. I'm wondering if I can consistently kind of do 10 a.m. Saturdays, because usually I don't have plans before noon on a Saturday. It just depends if there's stuff worth. I don't know. People want to have a morning Saturday live stream. The live numbers are usually pretty low, but part of that could be just that this channel is small, and part of it could be Saturdays are a bad pick. I don't know, but it has to work around my schedule, right? Or else I can't do it. So what we're going to talk about today is not me. No one wants to hear about that. We want to talk about watches. And so a lot of you have probably seen this. This came out back in March, I think, is when the Morgan Stanley reports came out. I know Teddy Baldassar on his channel had a significant discussion. I think he got access to the full report and was able to do a lot more coverage. So if you want to search it out, if you're curious about learning more, then that should be good to go. I see Cloud, one of my subscribers, is in. When is the club name being changed? I think it's already changed, Ken. I think it's good to go. And at least I'm now officially advertising it on all the new videos as the 99 Cent Club. This was Ken's idea to rename it. I think he maybe didn't know that it wasn't named 99 Cent Club originally. It was the Watches with Dennis Club, or the WWD Club, which sounds like WD-40 Club, which could be funny because there's probably a lubricant joke in there. But regardless, it is only 99 cents. So if people want to support the channel that way, you get a bunch of emojis, and that's about it. But it's 99 cents. So I'm 1 cent cheaper than the Dollar Shave Club, and you don't cut yourself. So it's like win-win, right? But anyway, it sounded like YouTube approved the name change. I did that name change submission. We're back. Let me shift back. We're now not talking about watches stuff. So I did the submission. YouTube has to approve your package that you offer people who pay money. So even though I just did a name change, it needed a review, but they did it in like an hour. So it should be live now. Last I looked, at least on the back end of my site, it's saying everything is 99 Cent Club. So anyway, back to today's topic, which does not require any money. None of my topics require any money. So this report came out in March. It's the 2023 report, so it's going to run through 2022. Obviously, we've got some past year reports from snapshots here from Morgan Stanley. Again, this link is in the description if you want to go and pull up this chart along with the article at Professional Watches. Isn't very long. If you search for the Morgan Stanley watch report, you can find some other places that have gone far more in depth about it. Or you could go on YouTube. And as I mentioned, Teddy Baldessar had a video where he kind of talked about the top 20 overall. We're not going to focus in on that. What I wanted to do today is have a discussion about how we improve. I'm going to use quotes, and it's a question. I don't have the answer. I have some ideas, but how do we improve the ranking of JLC and Tissot? Because they've been falling in the chart. So that's where I want to have the discussion today. Now, I emphasize ranking for a key reason. You could, I think a lot of you who are familiar with statistics or rankings in general probably already know this, but just to emphasize it for those that maybe don't think about that world all that much, you can have your rank fall and your sales go up. So, because it's all vis-a-vis how everyone else is doing. So, for example, when you look at this chart and you see Omega was the number 2, for 3 years here, so we're actually further back than that if we were to pull up older charts. And then Cartier, though, as of 2020, has jumped ahead in terms of and this is the estimated or calculated. It's mostly an estimate because some of these companies are private, like Rolex. But this is like how much money is made by selling the watches. So it's not the number of watches, it's the amount of money being generated by their sale. So Cartier jumped ahead of Omega. That doesn't mean Omega's sales have fallen. It just means that Cartier's sales figures are now higher in dollars, or in Swiss francs in this case, higher than what Omega's were. Omega still could have been improving every single year and have gone from second to third. So it doesn't mean your company's hurting necessarily that your rank is falling. However, it does mean that your relative share of the market is falling. And so from that perspective, we will approach this. Now, as I mentioned, there are 2 companies we're going to talk about. We're going to start with JLC, or Jaeger-LeCoultre. As you can see, if we go back to 2017, which is the earliest this chart that I've grabbed has got, but if you go back to like the 2022 report, you'll see a year further back. You can do that. Not necessarily ad nauseum, but you can go back quite a ways. So they were 10th at the start of this examination period. Then they fell to 12th in 2019. Then they fell to 13th in 2020. And then for the last couple of years, they've been at 14th. So they've slid 4 positions since 2017. So I think it's probably worth discussing what do you all, those of you who are on live, and if you're watching the recording, you can always comment, like, what do you think JLC should do differently if their goal was, we want to try and get back up to 10th, for example. Let's be realistic. They ain't going to be top 5, but let's say they want to get back to the top 10. Could they do it? Is there something they could do? And I think the thing that we will do, and we'll do this with Tissot as well, is the area to explore, I think, has to be the product lineup, right? Because what else is there? What else is there that's going on? Richemont, which controls JLC, is doing very well as an entity, as a company, as a conglomerate. They control a number of major watch brands. They're doing good. In fact, reviewing their stock performance, which I took a look at maybe about a month ago, it looked like, signs are looking better for them than Swatch Group. So, but that's not necessarily shocking because Swatch Group makes some weird decisions sometimes, in my opinion. So here is the current lineup. And I think what Neff has hinted at here in the chat, not hinted at, just blatantly said, a new Polaris would be a start. And that's where my mind initially went as well. And Ken has echoed that with the idea of more sports watches, less dress watches. And Koji has noted JLC is similar to Audemars Piguet with one classic design, but it's perceived as a dress watch. So there's much less interest. And I think all 3 of you are correct. And I think that's the direction to explore. Now, I actually already have, you can see the tabs up at the top, but I do already have the Polaris pulled up because I think that's an obvious one for us to go and explore. But I wanted to really quickly let everyone see what the major collection lines are at JLC currently, in case you didn't know. So unsurprisingly, because it's their most popular thing, the Reverso, that's the classic iconic design that they're known for. It's the first thing they show on their list. They actually show the Polaris as second. I'm not particularly surprised at that. Amongst watch buyers in the collector field, what is the most popular style of watch? It's the sports watch. And what's the most popular style of sports watch? It's the diver. So their dive watch shows up here at number 2. Then we got a dress watch, the Rendezvous collection, We've got another dress watch, one I think you're probably more familiar with than the Rendezvous. That'd be the Master Ultra Thin collection. Then there's also the Master Control, which sometimes gets discussed when we're talking about all the Masters. The Du Maître, I don't know anything about that, but it looks expensive. And then there's the Master Grand Tradition. This other stuff, they've got some ladies decorated like watch styles that are more bracelet, which I don't know anything about. And Atmos is a clock, so there's nothing to talk about there either. So jump to Polaris. Now, the Polaris is an interesting thing. Now, I actually brought up the Polaris on the last live stream because when I was at one of my area authorized dealers, which dealt in JLC when I was there for other reasons, but I asked them if I could look at a Polaris, and they didn't have any in the store. In fact, they indicated there was one amongst their chain of stores. This jeweler, I think, operates 3 stores in the Kansas City area. And so they said, hey, we can contact one of our other, Tivol is the name for those that know the area. They're like, we can contact one of the other Tivol stores and we can get it shipped over. So like, we can have it tomorrow if you want to come back and try it on. They had one. And it's like, okay, well, isn't that kind of telling? They don't have one because they're super hot and they can't keep them in. They have one because they don't sell very many of them. And so it's just not a big priority. I mean, they were almost pushy about trying to convince me to let them bring the watch in, and because I'm telling them, it's really like I collect watches and I'm curious. That's what I told them. I was like, I told them I'm not planning to buy it. Like I don't really think it's going to appeal to me. I just really wanted to see like how it wore, and they're just like, no, we can do it. We can do it. I'm like, I know you can do it, but I'm like, but no. So. Oh, Koji. Oh, yeah, because Koji's from Kansas City area. Tivol, the one on the plaza. And I actually went to the one. That's where I think they were going to ship it from, was the one on the plaza. But they also have a Tivol kind of near in Overland Park. That's the one I was at. So, because that's the closest store. I live about 8 miles from it. So the plaza is a further one out. And then I think there's a third one as well. But I'm not quite sure where that one is because it's even further away. Now, Ken has noted JLC has always had great dress watches, even other than besides the Reverso. And I think that's an excellent point. The Master Ultra Thin is one I hear a lot of collectors who are into dress watches talk about, and some other channels really have explored that. And anyway, continuing Ken's comment, he notes that he believes external factors like RTO stalling have also had to do with it. And yeah, it could be. It could be. And it could also, again, be JLC's doing fine. And this chart that we are talking about is just the fact that, IWC is doing better. Breitling, if we want to, and I might do this one on a different video, but we want to talk about brands that have been doing like gangbusters. Breitling's incredible, jumping up from 19th all the way up to 9th in this 6-year stretch. That's pretty cool. That's pretty impressive as a business. They've really turned it around. And Koji's asked, was there an uptick in JLC when Doctor Strange came out? I don't know. There was an uptick in discussions online where people had, this is like from what's the forum? Watch You Seek, I think is where I read this, where some people had claimed anecdotally, they were hearing people asking, oh, what's Benedict Cumberbatch wearing in this movie? That watch is really cool. So there were people who wanted to know what it was. I don't know how many people went out and bought one. From it. Wouldn't surprise me. Maybe there was a mild uptick just because people didn't know such a watch existed. And then, of course, it's being worn by it's in a movie, but it's being worn by a doctor. So, it's a nice watch because doctors make good money, all of that sort of stuff. So even though it was a gift in the movie, so they didn't really convey that it was from another doctor. Anyway, we're going too much into the Marvel universe. We don't need to explore that. So, I do think, though, if their goal is growth on the rankings, like they want to take a bigger slice of the Swiss market share, like this is the pie, their pie is like this, and they want to get back to this, or maybe even improve it to this. Exploring in the sports watch line makes a lot of sense. Now, the Polaris is in an interesting position. The movement, I believe, is fairly dated at this point. I think we've talked about that before, not in depth. I just think some people in the live chats before have mentioned that. You can see on these price points, in terms of where it's placed, like competitively, I won't say it's in no man's land, but this is not a great spot to be in my view. So like, here's the Polaris automatic no date, right? So it's 8,400 retail. The Rolex Submariner the regular, the no date version, is 9,100. So we're talking about what, a $600 difference to get into Rolex. Granted, you'll be waiting a bit for that. Whereas with Polaris, your only wait is finding out which store might still have one around because no one can bother to order anymore. So it's sort of close to that versus say Omega, where the Seamaster 300M is MSRP thousands less than this. So they're in this weird space on the like, okay, so we're a little bit cheaper than Rolex. So you're saying what exactly? Like, what are you saying exactly? That you're almost as good? And maybe it is, but it's a very different look with the internal timing bezel. So I don't know if price wise, like, if they need to go in a different direction, because if they want to keep this price point, I don't think they're going to go in and lower the price point. Do they go about approaching this a different way? One of the ideas I wanted to bring up is, again, amongst collectors, Glashütte Original is not a brand that I hear a lot of people discuss very much, but I have been hearing them more lately. And when I do hear them more, it's about this. This is actually their, was it Specialist? Yeah, Specialist. Sorry, I don't know German. Specialist collection, but it's all the CQs. So the CQs are their divers. The panorama date gets a lot of attention. I think in particular this blue model. Now this is a little bit. This is more like Rolex pricing, right? So actually, this is more than a date sub at 12.4. So this is more like along the lines of Blancpain Bathyscott pricing retail. But it's gotten a lot of attention. It follows a very, I feel, traditional dive watch aesthetic, but you've got the pano date as well, so it makes it look different than any other dive watch, just thanks to that date. I mean, the 430 date alone, again, other than Blancpain, I don't really know a lot doing 430 dates. A lot of people hate 430 dates, but when you go panorama date, there may be more mercy shown because you're doing big date. They call it panorama's big date, but maybe something like that. And I obviously don't clone it, but again, we were talking at the start a little bit about Longa. I thought part of the reason why Longa did what they did with their big date on like the Longa 1 and stuff when they rolled out in the 90s is I think they were using a JLC movement that JLC, I don't believe, ended up using for anything else. And it had like that functionality. So my point is JLC can do, I mean, even if they hadn't done one before, JLC can do a big date. So maybe that's something to do. It would definitely, in my opinion, look better than this not color matched. That's kind of what's irking me too. This not color matched 3 o'clock date went. So it's kind of like, we're going to place it where the Rolex would place theirs. It won't have a Cyclops on it. We're not going to color match the date window. And we're going to say it's $10,100, not even on bracelet. I don't know. But I mean, I think their look, like one of the big critiques about the 300M from Omega is a lot of people hate, you imagine the helium escape valve, which sort of sits right here on the case, the wart, as some people call it. And people don't like that very much. I think they've avoided that with the Polaris by keeping this stuff more like in a chronograph configuration off on the sides here. But I don't, when you first look at this, it's like, okay, I kind of get the dive watch vibe. It's neat that the timing bezel's internal. And I know they're not the only ones who do an internal timing bezel, but is the text too small? Like, what could they do to make it cool, to make it sell more? So Neff notes, sport is where it is at. Even Patek is sporting up their Calatravas. JLC has that awesome sector dial. I'd like to see them do a more casual sport with a 100 meters of water resistance. And you follow it up with the CQ is a good analogy of the decadent West. This watch is based on it. The watch is based on is like a 50 ruble diver and it's now $13,000. That just cracks me up. That's what decadent West wants. That's what we do. So that was my initial thought on the Polaris. Now, continuing the ways that for JLC to rank up, maybe it would be to do something sport, which kind of like what Neff was getting at with the casual / sport outside of a dive watch. Okay, so I imagine they're probably going to, given when they last refreshed the Polaris, I imagine a new Polaris refresh is coming within the next 5 years, I would think. But let's set that aside because I don't think it's going to dramatically change. Nothing else is a sport watch here. Everything else is a dress watch. I mean, maybe you could argue the grand tradition is something else, but I don't think so. I think they're all dress watches. So what about like a pilot's watch? Can they, like, is there a space that they can start moving in? They have interesting chronograph movements that they've used before. There's really no reason they couldn't take chronograph technology like they do with the Master Control and do something a little more rugged and pilot-like, like maybe a little more Breitling-like, or maybe a better analogy would be to look kind of towards IWC a little bit and say, hey, are there some things kind of like this that we want to go in our direction, maybe using our dial fonts and stuff, and making something super legible, sporty, but not dive watch. So we don't have to worry about the bezel thing at all. It's going to be cleaner on the case construction, and we're just going to, maybe we'll focus in on having a really cool chronograph. I don't know, because again, you know, the dive watch is the most successful space, but something maybe pilot watch, maybe like type A Flieger, but no, I wouldn't say straight up type A. Maybe something kind of as a blend, you know, maybe a triangle at the 12, but then you do something else in your own fashion. But I'm not sure. This is an interesting idea. Okay, so yeah, the Mimovox. I've looked at those. You know, I've seen them restored on some of the vintage restoration channels and stuff. So alarms. You know, that, setting aside how popular it was in the past, because I believe it was relatively successful, but I don't really know. I see Koji agrees with Neff's idea. That is there is a good opportunity, I think, there. So I do like that idea, Neff. And the reason why I think there's an opportunity is the Christopher Ward Bel Canto. So people kind of went gaga over that chiming feature. So an alarm feature, again, if people are kind of like, I want analog audio, I'm maybe this is a bit of a reach, but that's kind of where I'm at in my head. Is I'm thinking, don't do just a chime watch, but an alarm watch would be really cool. The thing I've always hated about most alarm watches, and I get them because they're supposed to wake you up, but they sound like really bad. Like they're all that brr, brr, and I've wanted one. I've liked the idea of, what if we had an alarm watch, but instead of, like, it was ringing like a minute repeater chimes. It doesn't have to have that complication, obviously. You have the simpler complication of just the alarm trigger, but instead it's striking a piece of metal or two different pieces. So maybe it's like a ding, 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 you know, something that sounds a little sexier than that's my buzzer impression. My buzzer impression is really bad. Hey, Jason, glad you were able to catch the live stream. Hope you're having a good weekend. And so maybe something like that. And again, because I mean, people kind of went nuts, right? Online, at least. And I heard the sales were good for the Bel Canto out of Christopher Ward. That same, I'm not to be super judge. I've never owned a Christopher Ward. But Meistersinger had done that years ago. Same exact complication. It's the same movement in one of their watches. Now, I could see where people would say the Christopher Ward looks better, or maybe even sounds better because how they reconfigured the chiming. But like, that feature had been done a few years ago by Meistersinger, and so we were, or I am wondering maybe something along those lines of that. And yeah, I had thought the Cricket had come back, Neff, and that's where this could work too if Vulcane's having success with that. Like, Vulcane isn't a brand I normally think about. Whenever I hear them, I think, oh yeah, they have that old brand that made crickets. But I know they've been around lately, and still actually is a fairly pricey brand for a lot of people. And yes, that was my attempt at an impression of the JLC Mimovox, Jason. And the reason was we are discussing JLC watches, and one of the ideas Neff had to bring them up in terms of sales rankings was to bring back the Mimovox. And the reason we're talking about that is we're focusing on two companies today out of the Morgan Stanley report that have dropped in ranking over these last few years. So we started with JLC, which has fallen from 10th to 14th. And so we were wrapping that part up because I want to go ahead and transition, since we're started talking about because I brought up Christopher Ward in the context of chiming alerts and these ideas with JLC for yeah, I'll have to go and I don't think I've seen that one. I'll have to go and find it and check it out. I haven't seen a lot on Polaris, and part of that is the look never was like super appealing to me as a dive watch. Like I'm more boring. I haven't been as interested in the internal timing bezel format. But that being said, that's where I kind of wanted to try one on last week when I was at the authorized dealer, because I was like, well, I should give it a shot, or at least look and see how it feels to turn it and how it wears and stuff. But the second brand I wanted to talk about was one that I think a lot of us have felt have been doing fairly well, and they might actually be doing better than they were, but they've fallen vis-a-vis the other companies, and that's Tissot. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about Tissot. Now, for those that don't know, and you can see it here on the chart, Tissot back in 2017 was sixth on the share of the Swiss market in terms of sales of their watches. They dropped to seventh as of 2019. They dropped again in 2020 to eighth. They held that for another year, and then they fell all the way to 11th in 2022. So that's a 5-position drop over this last 6-year period. This is from the 2023 Morgan Stanley report. And the question is, like, this one surprised me. That's why I wanted to talk about Tissot, because with the PRX, it felt like the excitement for Tissot amongst the collector community, which I know is just a small fraction of the total watch buying community, but like all-time high levels of excitement, right? Like the PRX was, oh, look, integrated sports watch. It actually looks like it has some finishing. It's at an affordable price point. You can get it in quartz, or you can get it mechanical, and it's still achievable. And so all of that. Plus, there are a few other models that have been popular out of Tissot. So real quick, here's the Tissot site. Here by their categories. So you see their main categories. The C-Star, that they've run the C-Star line for a long time. And in fact, I think the PRX is based off of an old C-Star. The Gentleman, that's one, another watch about the same price as the PRXs that a lot of collectors highlight quite a bit. A little more traditional, more conventional looking watch. But again, we're talking about under 400 retail for the quartz models and under 800 for the mechanical. But the PRXs, they were like game changers. Like, it wasn't the same hype as we saw for Moonswatch, but like when the PRX came out and people are like, holy crap, we can get, like, for under $700, we can get 80-hour power reserve, mechanical watch, integrated bracelet. That, like, I've never really heard a lot of people who complained about the finishing, not at the price point. And then the biggest debate was whether or not it was worth getting the automatic or just going ahead and spending under $400 and getting quartz, because the model it was originally based on was a quartz watch. And I actually owned a quartz one for a while. This blue one, in fact, was the one I had. And so that's where this report and this slide shocked me so much, because especially the 2022 slide, because the demand for the PRX, like, people really wanted them and they were able to sell them. Like, it wasn't like it was out of stock all the time. So I don't think it was a supply chain thing. It was, I mean, they were making sales. So I don't know. So I want to get some thoughts before we explore ideas on how would Tissot move up in the ranks, is what our question is that we're talking about today. So Neff says, to him, Tissot is a head scratcher with the popularity of the PRX, or at least that's how it appears. Very successful. And I again, it's been a darling of watch media, watch YouTube. Like, it's just, I've seen, like, Federico from Federico Talks Watches. He's very luxury oriented in most of his watch collection. He has been fawning over the TRX lately. I know Teddy Baldessar's channel has talked extensively about the PRX and the Gentleman. To be fair, he often covers both. Patrick with Pocket Time Watches, pretty glowing about his very, very loomed PRX he just recently got. Again, I'm just throwing out a few channels of various sizes, but it's getting talked about. And of course, they keep coming out with new versions. I think that's the real sign. And now Jason says, I work at Chivas. I know what happened with Tissot. Oh, and congratulations about moving from hobbyist to professional. Living the dream. Koji says, yeah, the buzz at least is on the net is so hyped for the PRX. I expected to be in the top 5. And Jason says, Tissot was being driven by the sports chronos for non-enthusiast folks, and the Powermatic was for the enthusiasts. Now, I have wondered about, okay, so that's good to know, because That's the one thing that to me was what would explain the, let me load the chart back up here so you all can see it. That was the one thing to me that would explain what's going on with the chart is Tissot was 6th in 2017, 2018, not because of collectors. And that they're 10th, or excuse me, 11th now and not lower is maybe because there are collectors who are excited about the PRX, but that the PRX is a collector watch for like nerds like us, or I shouldn't label you all, but I'll label me, nerds like me. That's not enough of the, that's just not enough of the market to make a dent in what's happening vis-a-vis all these other watches, because they have to sell beyond the people that are collectors. They have to sell the people that go in and occasionally like buy a watch because their kids graduating college and they want to get them a nice watch and all of that stuff. So Ken notes rankings are based on sales revenue also, and Tissot is entry-level affordable. Watches became investments the past 6 years, hence the drop in Tissot and Longines. And that is a good point as well. And as I talked about at the very start of the video, yes, bear in mind, this isn't about sales volume. It's about the dollars of the sales. So while we know Rolex both has a very high volume of sales at over 1 million units, they also have a very high average price, whereas Tissot's price, yes, is much more entry level. And there is a lot more pressure at the entry level space because of the smartwatch rise. And that's where I think I've always expected we would see a squeeze on the companies that are, well, Tissot, maybe not so much Longines to me, but Tissot, Seiko, Orient. That's part of the reason why I thought Seiko's trying so hard to launch all these plus, over $1,000 watches is I think their corporate leaders recognize like their biggest historic market, like what the Seiko 5 is kind of priced in now, it's too close to Apple Watch pricing. And anything kind of under that, people will be like, well, why don't I just get a computer for my wrist? So they're trying to like get a little more luxury. This is a guess. That's been my guess of theirs. So Neff notes, that's a good point. There's a 98% of the market, and then there's us. Also strange to me that Hamilton isn't on the list. Yeah, I don't know if Hamilton's volume is, I mean, again, it's sales volume, and so much of Hamilton is affordable and often available at discount versus what they list as retail. Like I had a Hamilton chronograph Pilot Khaki that was under $1,000. I think it was closer to like 800, but it official MSRP. It wasn't an Invicta bad, but it was like MSRP'd at $3,000. It was kind of silly. Jason says, but now with the PRX, the chrono and fashion guys stopped buying the chronos and wanted to have the PRX. It was harder to get the first few weeks. Yeah, and I'm wondering if we'll see an uprise when we get the 2023 data set in 2024 out of Tissot. And yeah, the smartwatch, it's weird. Like smartwatch thing it's so hard for us to evaluate. And it's because the volume of smartwatch sales are shocking. I wanted to think, I heard someone, if I'm wrong, I apologize. I heard a number like 95 million. And I was just like, wow. It's just kind of hard to fathom to think that, but I see them everywhere. I mean, I get it. I'm not surprised. And no, they're not all the Apple versions, but it's like Apple and Garmin and Samsung and some of these watch brands are trying really hard to get into smartwatches. I think because they recognize this and they're like, we just gotta get a slice of that pie. Whereas a lot of the brands, a lot of these top 20 brands that are on this list have gone the way that was the solution through the quartz crisis. And I personally think that it will work through. It's worked so far, so I think it's a safe bet. But I think it's going to continue to work with the smartwatch industry, which is luxury is different. Luxury is going to be romantic and mechanical, and or this high-end quartz or spring drive. It's all these exciting little concepts. It's like it's not about the accuracy. It's not about tracking your steps. This is about art and luxury, and that's where so many of these other brands are able to do what they do while selling less and less watches. And so and I think that's a perfectly good standard. Doesn't work so well for Tissot though, and maybe they need to do a Seiko and try and move themselves up market. The problem with Tissot though is they're in the Swatch group, and Swatch has a place for that. Like Swatch, I don't think is going to stand by and let Tissot become the same price as Longines. So I just don't think that's what their model's built on. They've got that whole pyramid thing going on where Breguet's at the top and Swatch and Flick Flack are at the bottom. Ken said, I wanted to give my Moonswatch Uranus to my niece in high school. She didn't want it, said her friends all had Apple Watches. Koji said, looking at the list, I'm frankly surprised to see Tudor so low and Breitling so high. Breitling has been making big moves. So, and it's been very successful. Their new lineups aren't as gaudy as the old, like, what Bentley era, like just big and loud and very early 2000s. That was like the stereotype of Breitling. And I think their new designs are a lot cleaner. Like you've got the Navitimers that aren't chronographs, so the dials are less busy, but you've still got the slide rule, and they're all really attractive. Breitling has done some really impressive moves, and I think they're successfully getting away from that. Like the controversies of the not really in-house movement that they called in-house and that sort of thing. So I just think they've got really good leadership and strategy there. Not that Tudor doesn't. Tudor's volume just, again, it's interesting. Sorry, I got loud motorcycles going by, but with Tudor, there's that's another one where we're kind of enthusiast biased, I think. Because we, and I think a Blog to Watch covered this on one of their podcasts. Maybe they had an article on it too, but where like Tudor, it's like Watch Media, and we'll lump YouTube in here too. We disproportionately cover Tudor like versus everything else, and I'm just as guilty of it. I probably have more first thought videos on Tudor than I do on Omega. Definitely more than I do on Breitling or JLC or Cartier. And I'll tell you why I do them, because I get views when I do them. Plus, I like the looks of the Tudors, so because they kind of look like Rolexes. But I don't think like broadly, when you get outside of the 2% of the collectors, the enthusiasts, to the 98% buying luxury watches, it's just, I don't know how many of them honestly go, oh, you say there's no Rolex in stock? Oh, here, let me get a Tudor. I don't think a lot of people think that way. An enthusiast might, because they're like, well, there's some really cool, like, I recognize this from the vintage era of Rolex, but it's modernized and it's in this package and I want it and it's available. And then the other people are like, no, I said I wanted a Daytona, and that's what it, like that's what all the guys at the investment firm have. So that's what I'm getting. That, again, speculation on my part. Jason says Premier is underrated, but it's a good seller. They moved volumes of that. IWC is hitting it big lately with their design. Yeah, I noticed IWC was an interesting. If you didn't see it on the chart, the whole chart's fascinating. I probably should have just done a video on the chart, quite frankly. But since Teddy Baldessar did one earlier, I didn't feel like I was this colonial. But IWC had this weird little bow. Again, this isn't much ranking change. From 8th, they dropped down to 10th, and then they've bounced back up to 8th. So they're kind of like this bow, little sag, where they've been doing some stuff, but they made some interesting things. IWC is really well, in my opinion, they're really well diversified, because their two most famous watch types are their pilot watch type, which is of course very sporty, and they kind of dominate the luxury pilot space, in my opinion. Like IWC is the one luxury sports brand that when you say their name, I think pilot watch, not dive watch first. So they've got that. And then what's their second most popular line? It's the Portuguese line. Famous, massive, huge dinner plate. I used to have one. Dinner plate dress watch size. So they've got, it's interesting because they're known for two big things, and one's sports and one's dress. And a lot of people, don't get to have that luxury to be known for two different categories like that. Like Rolex is all about their sports watches, and it works great for them. So because they've got multiple lines that everyone identifies with. But like no one says Tudor and thinks dress watch. Well, maybe one of you do, but don't admit it if you do, because I want to be right. So let my statement be right. Neff notes, I like Tudor. It appeals to the enthusiast. Definitely. And I think that's why you see Watch Media kind of fawn all over Tudor and get so disappointed when they kind of don't deliver on what we were hoping for, because it's like, it's luxury, but it's entry level enough on the price points that it's obtainable. And they do look good by and large. but I'm a big fan of their design choices. So Koji notes, yeah, we're all in this weird you're using words that I don't know, solipsistic bubble of watch geeks, and I have no concept of what the buying public is doing. Ken says the public prefers Breitling over Tudor, not us. That's a good statement, and I understand what all those words meant. Neff says, isn't that the truth, Takoji? I don't have a clue what normal people do. They save money. I do. I know what they do. They save money. Maybe they blow it on something else, but they don't blow it on watches. Ken says, Breitling has all these stores and boutiques. And Jason notes the Engineer is now very in demand. And, there was a lot of question because Watch Media again, I read the articles when the Engineer, the new version came out, and most of that was like the one watch that had pushback. And the pushback was, it looks great. Why is it so much money? Like this should be, and I mean, like people were taking hard stances on it. Like this should be 50% less, not like 10% off. Like you should be able to get 2 of these for this price. I mean, I remember reading and hearing statements like that. And so very, very, very interesting. Now, in order, because my planning completionist nature is I need to finish up the Tissot topic and then we can have a freehand discussion. Let me try and rein us back into that. We were talking about the Tissot. We were talking about the PRX and success. We're talking about this lineup, or this chart, excuse me, where in the lineup, we've seen the decline of Tissot vis-a-vis the other companies, even though Tissot might still be doing quite well. Right, have even been improving on their sales figures. I don't know. I don't have the dollar amounts in hand to do the comparisons. One of the things I wanted to say was, all right, so what would be a strategy for Tissot? Like what makes up for these shifts? Like with what Jason pointed out, the chrono is not being purchased anymore, and the PRX kind of rising up. My theory, this is what I'm gonna guess. This is what I'm gonna suggest. So if you're going to stay in this price point, and I think you are, I think as Tissot you are, I think even if you wanted to move on, you can, but I don't think Swatch Group's going to let them. My suggestion would be not a PRX solution. And yeah, I believe, at least in I thought I saw your PRX concepts. Yes, I saw that video. But I don't want to, and there are some good ideas there on the PRX. The thing is, I'm wondering in my brain, and I wonder what the chat thinks, is I wasn't going to actually suggest iterating more in the PRX line, which is what they are doing currently. Like, they had their PRX chrono, and then they came out with a 35 millimeter. And then like the concepts you've come up with, I think those are winner concepts. So I'm not going to say don't do them. But I kind of get this, like Tissot almost to me feels like they're doing the Tudor thing. Like, okay, Black Bay worked, right? Let's just do a bunch of Black Bay forever and ever and ever. Just lots and lots of Black Bay. And there's some really cool Black Bay things that are coming out. So I don't want to tell Tudor, like, don't do the Black Bay things. But likewise, it's sort of like, maybe diversify a little bit. So here's what my suggestion would be is the integrated bracelet at affordable price point, I think is a winning strategy. Enthusiasts like it. The fashion people are going to be into it. So you just need something else other than the PRX and anything else in your lineup currently. So I would say take inspiration from this, but do it cleaner. So Christopher Ward, the 12 comes out, a lot of buzz about it. Again, this is kind of a darling with a lot of watch enthusiasts as well. This is a brand, especially post Bel Canto. So you saw these watches that they came out in 2 versions. You got this for about $1,000. I think it's more like $1,100 on bracelet. Let's load them up on steel, and then they end up doing a titanium iteration as well. So you go in like, all right. So on bracelet, we're talking like $1,200, $25. So Tissot's currently what? Like 700-ish, 800-ish on the mechanical. Oh, that's the gentleman. Let's close that. We don't want to look at that one anymore. All right, so 700-ish for the mechanical. So there's a delta still here. What can you do between $700 and $1,200 and make it better than that? Because you know what? Your Tissot, you should be able to beat Christopher Ward at this. And I'll tell you why I think that. It's nothing to do with the quality or capabilities of Christopher Ward. Tissot has the Swatch Group, though. The economy of scale is on their side. Mathematically, logically, it should not make sense for a micro brand to actually be able to beat the price of a developed watch from a major manufacturer. Now, when you start factoring in stores and stuff, if they're running a bunch of boutiques and they're running ads and stuff, you can factor, those are all voluntary choices, though. So here's the thing. The 12 at $1,225, there's a lot of aspects about this design I do not care for. But if you were to take something, maybe Igeneur style, instead of this, which maybe some people might go, it's the old C-Star, I get it. But when people look at it, I think they kind of get a vibe from the case shape of something maybe a little more Royal Oak-esque. But you take a basically different case design, integrated bracelet, Powermatic 80, is a far better performing movement in terms of duration of power reserve than the SW200 that come in these watches with their 38 hours of power reserve. So you do that and you come in at under 1200, you do something to compete with this. You do the same thing, yes, use US dollars because I'm an American, on the titanium. Tissot, do a titanium, do a grade 2 titanium, same sort of thing. Maybe do one for the PRX as well, if they don't have it already. Do grade 2 titanium. This $1,900, you can beat your Tissot. You can beat this price point with the machining capabilities of the Swatch Group. They put in an SW300 on this. Powermatic 80 can still go in this watch too, because it's still better power reserve than it's a whole day's extra power reserve than the SW300 offers. So that's my suggestion. Is Tissot just double down on integrated bracelets, but do a new line separate from PRX, but do titanium options, because I think that's the new thing. People want really lightweight watches, so do it, as the Emperor would say from Star Wars. That was a pretty good impression. So give me a thumbs up for the impression. All right. So I want to catch up on chat because I wanted to push through my spiel before I forgot what all I was going to say. We already talked about that from Jason about the engineer being in demand. And I like this part. Bruh. I'm sure that's how you said it. Bruh. Titanium, grade 5, finished. And I like that emphasis. And I think that's part of where people don't always see and maybe it's just because of a generalized ignorance in titanium. And I hold that same ignorance. But one of the things that came up when I was actually giving my first thoughts on the Omega World Timers, the green one and the titanium one that they just announced this week, is I was like, why is Omega doing grade 2 titanium on a $10,000 watch? Could they not do grade 5? And maybe they can't. I don't know. The dial on the titanium one, this was the irony. And this was confused. I saw some written media groups, when they were getting this, same press release stuff. They were confused initially, or the press release wasn't clear. They thought it was a grade 5 watch. I think one of I don't remember if it was Fratello, one of the watch media, so I don't want to say who it was. I read several of their articles, but one of them mislabeled it and initially in the first release of their article said it was grade 5. The dial is grade 5. And that makes it extra confusing. The dial that the laser etched planet motif is a grade 5 titanium dial, and then the watch is grade 2. Grade 2 is great for, an Oris. I say that because I own one. Grade 2, I think, makes sense for the Pelagos. But I think once you're getting around $10,000, people are going to start wanting some sort of difference. And grade 5 and the finishing you can do with grade 5 is why a lot of people want that, because of the ability to polish it. We already talked about that. Neff said they should do a PRX smartwatch. Okay, that's an interesting idea. Replace the dial with a color screen, and that would be the smartwatch I might be interested in wearing. Okay, that's a good idea. Jason was sharing the price of the automatic version of the PRX. That's with the Powermatic 80. Yes, $675 US. And yeah, that's an idea. Meta certify the Powermatic 80. Or say you've regulated it to cost standard or something. Another thing that maybe they could do is what's the warranty? What's the recommended service intervals on Tissot watches? Could they get, this is we can say what we want, right? We're enthusiasts. This is very speculative, but what if Tissot could get to where they're able to, or the whole Swatch Group with their Powermatic 80 and able to say the Powermatic 80 is a 10-year service interval movement? You all know how rare that is, right? I mean, who else does 10-year service interval movements? Rolex is the big one, and Oris has started to do it on some of their in-house movements. I don't know anyone else. There probably are others. It's definitely not common. To be able to do that, at least for the time date ones, maybe they can't get away with doing that on the chronograph iterations of the watches, but for the time plus date ones, I think it's a really big deal when you tell someone you should be able to trust that, and we're going to warranty it. You should be able to trust that as long as you don't abuse this watch, we're not out here to try and gouge you with 3 to 5 year service intervals to make us money on our in-house movements. It's 10 years, and you'd be cool with, a lot of people are really, really cool with that. Jason loves my idea, says it was the greatest idea he ever heard. Kind of. I'm paraphrasing the statement. But anyway, that's those were all the items. Those were the two I wanted to talk about. Obviously, I'll load back up the chart here again. Let me get rid of my face so you can actually see the bottom. It was Chopard. I was covering up Chopard there. So So this is the overall chart. I mean, if anyone, we have a few more minutes. I normally like go about an hour, but if there are other brands you wanted to talk about, I mean, Rolex isn't very interesting. Number one, number one, number one. I think that share actually has gone up too. They used to be close to 25% of the Swiss watch market. I think they're now around 30. So I guess my suggestion to Rolex would be keep doing what you're doing because it's working. Cartier, doing really well also. I've always, we've talked about that before. I've always really liked, even though I'm not a huge fan of a lot of their watch designs, I've always really liked that Cartier seems, and maybe it's because they're a jeweler first, but they seem more willing to be experimental on designs. And like if the case, like if everyone thinks it sucks, they just kind of move on. They're like, whatever, we're Cartier, we're creative. we don't we do what we want. We don't just regurgitate the same concepts and just change the dials. Now maybe they do that on the Tank Musts. Here's 3 new colors for the year, but those are fairly simple watches too. Neff notes, it's a great idea. It goes against the disposable nature of smartwatches, and to have a watch that will last a lifetime and is guaranteed for a decade, that might bring people over. I wonder if it really, like the guarantee, if it even really changes that much. I mean, maybe the problem is right now they just haven't had the Powermatic 80 out long enough to really know how long it can endure without servicing. But just to even just say it, just to go ahead and decide we're going to say that and stand by it. In theory, I just think most watch companies in general overstate the service intervals as is. And I don't know what you all have as a philosophy on watch servicing. My rule has been on it that I service in 2 instances. One, obviously, when the watch is broken, it needs to be serviced and get serviced. If I start to notice it's significantly running out of spec, I do the same thing. So, like, I owned my Explorer 2 Rolex for about 12 years. And I bought it used. And I don't know if the jeweler I bought it from had serviced it or not. But anyway, I went well past the 10-year service. This is by a couple of years. But I noticed that it was gaining about a minute a week. And it was getting annoying enough that I was like, I'm going to take this in and get it serviced, which was great. It runs way better now. I had not realized how much nicer it would be once serviced. And that was back when it was really the only watch I was wearing. So I started to really notice that the time gains were happening. It's harder for me now, and I might actually let things slide more than I would back then because I rotate watches so much that I'm often having to reset them. Now, I usually know where they run as of when I get them because since I always do or at this point, always, I was going to say almost always, I might have one watch still I've never reviewed. I'm not sure. But since I review them all, I put them all on time graphers within the first week in order to assess them for my review. So I always know if they're running out of spec. And then it's like most of the time they're fine. And then if I'm still not happy, like with the Orient or when I had a Vostok, I'll regulate them myself. But those were both in spec watches. I just thought I could do a better job of it because I think they just get assembled and no one checks them. So, but anyway, that's really all I had for today's topic. So anyway, I hope those of you tuned in live enjoyed it. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll try and do another one next week. I haven't decided what to talk about because I usually decide it the night before. But yeah, this time is so far been working okay for me. I haven't planned another group discussion yet because I've been busy planning a conference for work. So it's just hard. It's just hard for me to multitask. Plus, I've got I run a nonprofit and we do an audit every year. So I've got audit field work next week because I always like to have a fresh audit for the board to review because I like to do things above board. So anyway, I've been too busy to plan one of those, but if you have suggestions, you can always post them or email them to me or whatnot. And other than that, if you watch this recorded, I hope you enjoyed the topic and the discussion. Thank you very much, live chat, for contributing. It really helps. It really helps the discussion actually be a discussion and not just like some weird lecture from a non-watch expert like me. And until the next video, I hope everyone has a really good, however long period of time it is. But take care, everybody.